So, this is just a tiny rant, really, on an idea I had about self acceptance and self awareness. And to really just get down to business, a lot of people, they're never really ready to look at the mirror. They're never really ready to look inside of themselves because they're afraid. And fear has been a big aspect of human existence and condition. And it's because of this fear and the lack of overcoming it that no one can actually see who they are. Seeing themselves as what they are, they don't realize, or even I at one point didn't realize, or people in general sometimes don't realize that not feeling that aspect of looking in yourself, to look in the mirror and genuinely see what you are, is probably more liberating than being in a delusional mindset. If you consistently live your life in a delusional mindset of what you are and who you are, you're gonna eventually find a taste of what it is to actually see what you actually are by somebody or something. And this is apparent within people who, for example, do actions such as, ridiculing people or making gossip. And then when you initially confront them, they'll become very defensive. And this is the lack of awareness they have of what they are, the lack of acceptance of what they are. When we ridicule people about what and who they are, we're more likely to cause more problems than less. What I mean by this is that if people were more self accepting of who they are, less generalized conflict and ideas would occur. For example, if a person does not accept themselves, they're gonna emit or portray darker qualities or darker instances. Like I said, an example of the gossip type, or for example, if someone is to say mean or hurtful things to you as a defense mechanism. But self acceptance decides to take that away. It moves you past that instance. It tells you that it's okay to be what you are and that anything else besides that, even the darker parts, it's okay. And what self acceptance also does for you is take away a narrative, which is you have to be accepted by everybody else. What I'm not trying to propose here is that you should be an absolutely immoral person with absolutely no integrity when it comes to morality and you should just do whatever you want. But accepting your darker parts, even the worst parts about yourself, is going to be more liberating and more better for you to become a person and self-actualize than to be someone who is dismissive of what they are. If you're finding yourself to constantly run away or disengage with anything to do with what's in you, you're going to just eventually build it up. It's going to become more and more of a mechanism, or more of a mechanism will develop to push yourself away from that idea. It's causing inner tension. But when you tell yourself that it's okay to be whatever that instance is or whatever that thing is within you that you're so afraid to, look to, and you tell yourself, at the end of the day, it is me, and there is a power within me itself. You see, anyone else can tell you that they don't accept you for what you are. And obviously there's many contexts to this, but I'm just meaning in a generalized way. Maybe you have, I don't know, bad habits, or maybe you've had mistakes. The thing about self-acceptance is that you don't initially look outward. There's a difference between being arrogant and self-accepting yourself and then seeking to just be a complete cunt to everybody else around you. Or there's also a difference of, I accept what I've done, and it gives yourself a whole feeling. But I also understand I've done something wrong with somebody else. I think a lot of people have a misconception when it comes to people telling them that they should accept themselves. They think that it's just a one-way trip to, yeah, I did wrong, but you can't judge me. There's a truth and a fault and a false to that as well. Yeah, people are going to judge you. And if you're a person with integrity, you're going to understand that that's okay. But if you're a person with integrity and a self-acceptance, that kind of just, emphasizes that integrity, because you realize that at the end of the day, your own initials, your own ability to judge yourself and to accept yourself is going to create much less tension and much less care for other people. So that's just one aspect of self acceptance. I feel like self acceptance and self awareness kind of go hand to hand. You have to be self aware of the fact of what you are, and then you have to accept that. So it's kind of like a system, almost like a process. But I think that it doesn't only go in terms with a self actualization or becoming a whole or individual. It can also come into terms with conflict. I'm talking worldwide conflicts, I'm talking political issues, I'm talking all of these things. My insight onto this is quite simple, really. Obviously, there's many opinions of politics, of world issues, and obviously, I'm not going to just render it to black and white thinking because that wouldn't be fair on my end, and that wouldn't be fair in the actual issues. But when it comes to self acceptance and self actualization, I feel like these psychological ideas or concepts play quite in hand to these issues. There's obviously people without moral character, without integrity, and I feel like maybe not all, but some must definitely have this idea of, well, I must gain power, I must gain this, I must gain that. And so they, well, take people out of the equation, use them, think that it's a chess game and that they're just the pawn, everyone else is the pawn around them, and that they're the king and the queen. Um, and where this idea that I'm proposing of self actualization and self awareness and self acceptance is that if self awareness was much more of a keen idea into humanity, it was if people were to actually develop their self awareness, whether that be proposed in school systems or whether that be proposed in just in general day to day life, or whether people read that stuff more or knew about the psychology behind it, we would all be much better off. Because in all honesty, everything that's a renderance, at least in my opinion, of war, conflict, political issues, and social dynamics that are very, there's so much conflict in these social issues. They're all because, or not, I'm not going to generalize again, all, but most, in my opinion, because of these factors. You see, if people were to accept themselves for what they were and have self awareness, they'd be able to first understand what they're doing and then go on to self acceptance. What I'm proposing is, this is just a general idea. It's not the truth. It's just an insight that I had. Um, that if people were to actually accept what they are, regardless of other people, and integrate that fact by accepting it, they wouldn't emit such, well, safe to say, callous tendencies. For example, if I'm an individual who thinks I'm absolutely sensitive, I'm like extremely sensitive, I'm extremely, belittled by other people, I'm going to find myself hard to accept this fact because, in the first instance, the human reaction to genuinely see this as a weak trait, it's not good, it's bad. You shouldn't be sensitive, you shouldn't be weak, and our gender dynamic might even emphasize that males shouldn't feel this type of way, or that they shouldn't be sensitive, or that they shouldn't feel these emotions and whatnot. And these are just all social constructs and ideas portrayed by other people, and that's a completely other topic. But what I'm trying to focus on is the idea of understanding this and accepting it. And like going back onto the example, if someone were to actually just feel this way, they're a man, for example, and they've been told that to be a man is to not feel, to not have emotions. I'm not even talking about the expression, I'm just talking about the sensitivity. Anything that someone says, or if you see someone in her, or anything like that, that emits sensitivity because of your psychological nature, and you don't accept that, it's going to create tension. And this is what I mean. Obviously, if a person is not accepting the internal fact of they are a sensitive individual, they're going to come up with a delusion of regard to it. They're going to think to themselves that they cannot think this way and they have to become thick-skinned. And a lot of people don't understand this. That's not healthy in the first place. You've already, first of all, completely created tension. There's already been a wall there. A boundary has been placed in between in between reality and delusion, and you're moving more towards delusion because you're placing more walls against the reality of it. So you're moving to delusion. Now what happens is that you're going to start emitting and this is the weird thing about the brain, right? All these mechanisms, and I find it very fascinating, to be honest, but you're ending up making these mechanisms now to really emphasize your delusion. And this can also go into another topic about how our subconscious mind genuinely plays a huge part in our actions. I don't think I'm going to bring that in because that's going to be a whole other issue. But in the sense that if you are someone who is, so you're someone who is sensitive, and you've completely disengaged with the idea, and you've made yourself think that you're a thick-skinned individual, that you cannot be sensitive, you have to be thick-skinned, you can't take things to heart, you're going to emit other traits that are not even you, because your subconscious mind is going to tell you now, well, hold on a minute, I can't think this way, I'm bad for that. So one, you've already created some form of self-hatred internally, and now how it's going to come out is in your relationships and in um your social dynamics, because what your brain will do now, and this is obviously, like I said, the fascinating thing about the subconscious mind, it's going to create mechanisms to draw you away from ever even thinking that you were genuinely a sensitive person. You're going to become more hurtful to people. You won't be able to engage in emotional connection. You'll be more emotionally unavailable. And the list can go on, and we can name every single trait. But the point is that since you've completely disregarded reality for what it is, because you cannot accept that, you had the self-awareness, you knew that you were like that, but you didn't accept it. Now, let's say there is a person like this, and they've done this, and they're realizing now, and now here's where more self-awareness comes in, because you're starting to see the play of your brain, you're starting to see the belief system of it, and how instead of just accepting that simple fact of that you are a sensitive individual, it's become much more of a, well, nuance or nuisance to your life. And obviously now here's where more self-awareness pops in, because now you're saying to yourself, well, hold on a minute, I've actually realized I've actually done something, like I'm doing something wrong here. I shouldn't have just done that. So you forgive yourself. You allow yourself to sulk in these emotions and understand yourself again. And you start to realize that, well, even if sensitivity may be a hindrance in some cases, you start to look at the optimistic points to maybe render the fact that it's okay to be sensitive. There's always a double-edged sword. There's always a good and a bad between every trait. You know, but the key idea is you accept that. You accept the fact that you are sensitive, and this blossoms you. It makes you more whole and integrated, and it stops these, emotional wreckages or these constraints on your relationships, because you're not becoming, or you're not emitting a defense mechanism. You're not engaging in a disillusion or a delusion, sorry. Um, you're becoming more you. You're becoming whole. You become emotionally available again. Your sensitivity actually prospers, because now you're starting to see, well, I accepted who I am, and now you're seeking balance. And this is the thing. This is only one instance. I think a very basic instance, really, of self-acceptance and self-awareness. But this can play into practically any social dynamic, any political issue, any war. I feel like these two traits are these two concepts. My apologies, are genuinely a very huge aspect of, the world and how it operates, because I'm not gonna sit here and say as a, like, some sort of prophet, that it would just completely disillusion the whole world and make it completely free, and we be living in a utopia. No, of course that's not gonna be the case. But if people were to emphasize these things, they would genuinely help us as humans, and they would genuinely help us in social connections, becoming more progressive as humanity in a whole, and just completely increasing our human emotions and connections, and genuinely making a positive impact. Obviously there's an extreme to this, and I think this is important. Obviously, if you're going to do something very immoral or very bad, you're not just going to, there's a thing called self-acceptance, but there's also a thing called integrity, and you can't just go to the far end and say, well, I'm going to kill someone, but hey, I accept that. That's a very extreme point. Or hey, I'm going to rob this, but you know what, I accept who I am. There's a difference. Everybody has a bad and a good, but it's up to your consciousness and your moral integrity to understand that you can accept it. There's a difference between acceptance and acting on it. If I accept that, for example, I have tendencies to steal, that's going to make me more whole and more controlled than if I would just say, yeah, I'm going to accept it, but I'm going to act on it. Or yeah, I don't, or even I don't accept it and I will still act on it. Um, so in other words, it will give you more self-control. Um, I hope that made sense. I don't know if this was an extremely, unclear or unorganized way. I've been wanting to make a video for a while. I'm still working on the project that I'm going to make after this. But yeah, I just wanted to make a video on an insight I had. But other than that, that's really all I have to say. I can't wait for people to tell me in the comments how wrong I am. But yeah, thank you very much.